What they're
Yeah.
doing, I'm sorry, I get emotional about it. What they're doing to children in school today is child abuse. And I don't stand for child abuse.
That's right.
And you shouldn't stand for child abuse.
We caught a conservative school district in Indiana teaching kids in the public school how to take the bus route to an abortion clinic.
Yeah, warning, don't allow strangers any access to your children.
Welcome to the Elizabeth Johnston podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Johnston, and my guest today married Hercules. That's it. That's the bio. Just kidding. Just kidding. Sam Sorbo is an education freedom advocate. Sam's mission is to help parents and their children emancipate from our modern school system. A successful Hollywood film actress, writer, and producer, Sam stepped back from her own career to immerse herself in the home education of her 3 young children for over a decade. Recognizing the brokenness of our institutional system led Sam to understand there is much more to education than just academics. As a prolific author, podcast and radio host, international public speaker, and mentor, Sam is dedicated to teaching families how to educate differently. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
You're welcome.
I hope I can help some parents today make the decision for family that is so difficult to make, so challenging for us to make in our current culture.
You're right. You're right. Sam and I have known one another for years, and her husband, Kevin, and I have worked on a project, and we've all ended up at some of the, same speaking engagements together. And I'm always impressed by how brilliant and beautiful this actress is and how articulate she is on this issue of education and the assault on the minds of our children. So I'm really honored, Sam, to feature you on the podcast today. And I would like for you to just take us back for a minute. How in the world did you make the giant leap from Hollywood to homeschooling?
Yeah, that should be the title of my next book, From Hollywood to Homeschooling.
Yes.
I'll tell you honestly, it was with great reluctance and huge trepidation. And I said to Kevin, I think I could fail at homeschooling our kids and they'll still be better off.
Wow.
And that is actually truer today for most people than it was for me. I mean, I did it just before they implemented Common Core. So I didn't even really see what was coming down the pike. All I thought was, they're not really educating my son. And there's a lot of bad stuff that's coming out of his school experience that I didn't appreciate. And I thought, well, if nothing really good is coming out because they're not educating him, he's getting bored, and he's picking up these bad habits or, all the social stuff that was coming out of the school, I was like, I could keep him home and he'll be better off. And then if I can get a little bit of education in him, well, it's a win-win. Like, why not? But I was scared. And that's why I was scared. Fast forward to, I was so gratified to have the relationship that I had with my very, very clever children and to understand that education doesn't come in a box. And learning shouldn't be institutionalized or made to feel like it's burdensome. Like all of these things that I discovered about our very definition of education. And I realized that I wanted other parents to have the joy that I discovered. And so that became my mission. And it's a mission. Yes, I want the parents to have the joy, but I really want to save the kids because what they're doing, I'm sorry, I get emotional about it. What they're doing to children in school today is child abuse.
Over the past weeks and months, I've been telling you about a company called Donatio. I'm sure you've heard of the fee that accompanies every online or in-person transaction. Usually it's 2 or 3% of the total purchase, and this goes to the payment processor. We use these payment processors every day at our local coffee shops and our favorite retailers. Well, Donatio is a Christian payment processing company that has committed to giving away 50 50 cents of every dollar they earn to organizations that fight to end human trafficking, domestic violence, hunger, and homelessness while promoting adoption and other pro-life causes. They are on the front lines of shining the light in dark places. If you own a business or website, go to donatioprocessing.com and see if this would be a good fit for you. Now the fees that you are already paying to a payment processor will go to causes that you believe in. In fact, if you switch over to Donatio and tell them I sent you, they have agreed to give 50 cents of every dollar of that to this ministry. You could do so much good without really having to do anything. So go to donatioprocessing.com, fill out the quick form, and tell them that Elizabeth Johnston sent you. Do business, do good, Donatio. If you'd like to become an elite sponsor of the Elizabeth Johnston podcast and get more eyes on your business or organization, please email us at elizabeth@elizabethjohnston.org.
What they're doing, I'm sorry, I get emotional about it. What they're doing to children in school today is child abuse, and I don't stand for child abuse.
That's right.
And you shouldn't stand for child abuse.
Take me back even a little further, Sam. So you met your husband, Kevin Sorbo, who on the set, right, of the film, the Hercules show. Is that correct?
I played a princess.
You were right. You were princess. You were his love interest.
Yep.
And you all hit it off pretty quickly and had just an amazing chemistry and really similar values, right? And got married pretty quickly. And how quickly did you have children?
Well, so we got married a year and a half into our relationship. We were engaged within 6 months, and then we were married a year later. But 8 months into our engagement, Kevin got very sick and ended up in the intensive care unit. And I was faced with a choice of either career or marriage. I saw it that way. It really is that way, by the way. You can't have it all. I know they try to tell you can have it all, female empowerment and all that. And so I made the choice for my marriage and my family to be. And so that really set me up for when I had kids and making that choice. But it took us a while to get pregnant because he was so sick.
Wow. He had some strokes, right? A lot of people don't know this about Kevin's story.
Yeah, he had 3 strokes, maybe 4. We're not really sure.
Okay.
They didn't diagnose him very quickly. It took him about 3 years to get back to himself.
So it was several years before you started having children. By that time, you had already settled into just accepting the fact, I guess, that an actress and an actor traveling, it wasn't going to work for your family, right?
Well, when we got married, I made a deal with Kevin. We both made a commitment, I should say, that we would never spend more than 2 weeks apart.
Wow.
And that's hard to do when both people are working.
Have you been able to keep that commitment?
Yeah, we kept it up until I think my youngest was 16, was the first time that we broke it by a day.
Wow. That's really
and
incredible.
Even so, it's interesting because maybe I'm not sure. Maybe we thought that if we did it through having our kids, like through that whole time period, it would be okay to then break. It's not okay, actually. It's not okay to break it. So we just keep it. And every once in a while, when it just push comes to shove and you got to break it. But basically, no, we're keeping it.
Wow, that's amazing. Just your fidelity to one another and to your vows and your commitment
I mean, it's
to each
important
other.
for people to understand that it takes work, I guess, right?
Right.
It's not just you fall in, we have such a Greco-Roman sort of view of what love is, and it's not a biblical view. And if you take a more biblical view, you understand love is sacrifice. Well, I can't be sacrificial if I'm off gallivanting around and he's over there and I never see him.
Right.
So
that was one of the things, Sam. We're going to get more into homeschooling and just education in general and the attack on children and the sexualization of children in culture today. But that was one of the things that really struck me as I knew that I was going to marry my husband and I was making those big decisions. I was, a student in college, and I was actually a music major and had always been kind of a natural leader. And when I was dating him, engaged to him, there came this point where I had to make a decision as well. I really began to see that having children, what I wanted my life to look like, that it was possibly not going to be, we were both not going to be able to have a career in order to do that. And it's different in everyone's situations, but we were surrounded by a lot of homeschooling families in our church. And I was so amazed by how close these families were to one another, how close the siblings were to one another. They spent all day together. They just seemed to have really strong relationships and were, bright and were highly socialized and relational with older adults. And I was just so impressed. And I began to think just about the way God created us, and he did not place us in classrooms. He placed us in families. And it was just like,
True.
duh, my gosh, this is such a no-brainer,
Well,
and not to say that every single person can do this, but for me, as I was actually making big life-altering decisions, I switched my degree from music education to elementary education. My dad wanted me to graduate before he would allow me to marry. And I thought, Bill Clinton was president at the time, showing my age here, and we were actually very concerned about our rights to home educate. There was a lot of chatter about our rights to home educate being taken from us. And so I switched my degree so that I could be a certified teacher and know that I at least had that extra layer of protection, regardless of what laws might have come down the pike. But I just never could get excited about falling in love with a person, wanting to spend the rest of my life with them, and then he goes one way all day and I go another way all day, and our children go another way all day. I was like, this isn't making sense for me.
no, because we're relational.
Yes.
Human beings are relational beings, and we're trained now in our schools. We've been schooled to put relationships last on the list, all the way at the bottom. Career, self, self-promotion, YOLO, like all of this stuff. And yet what's on the tombstone is the life that you lived and the people you leave behind. It's
100%.
not how much money you made or how many houses you owned or what kind of car you drove.
Right.
And so while the school is, so the schools teach our children that success is defined by how much money you make. Your self-worth is tied intrinsically to your earning potential or your earnings. And that's a lie.
Right.
And unfortunately, most of our culture has bought that lie, which is why there's such an assault on children, because children can't earn anything. And then after children, it's old people. So when they finally figure out how to get us all on board with abortion, which of course they can't, but get the culture entirely on board with abortion, which it's very close.
Yes.
That we've got an amendment to our Constitution in the state of Florida now that has zero restrictions on abortion after viability, and they don't define viability. So viability may be conception, we don't know, or might be birth or even after birth. Now my point is, there's a war on children in the United States, and I'm leading the charge to defend children. And the first defense of children is reestablishing parental authority. And the only way to do that is to keep the kids home, because the parental authority is challenged the moment you drop your child off at school. You have lost your parental authority. It's inevitable. And it's nothing in specific that the teacher does or that the school does. It's the paradigm. When you drop your child off at school, you are saying to that child, I don't know. They know better than I do. Your authority is gone.
And it's hard to get people to believe this and to see this risk.
You can't fix stupid.
I will never forget. I'll never forget the time that we caught a conservative school district in Indiana teaching kids in the public school how to take the bus route to an abortion clinic, so that if they needed to get an abortion, and of course their parents aren't going to drive them there, these kids knew how to get to the abortion clinic. I mean, that's when I launched
Yeah,
Sex Ed Sit Out is,
right.
we
You
were
might
beginning to find these kinds of just
Yeah,
outrageous.
they're everywhere.
Mhm.
They're everywhere. You might think that you have a conservative school because four of the five people that sit on the school board
Mhm.
claim to be conservative. Can we just wake up for a minute and agree that people who say they're conservative may or may not be
Mhm.
conservative? I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
Mm.
Like, we have somebody running for president who is an avowed communist but says that she's not. So,
Right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Like, for parents to be, well, it's the brainwashing. And it's
Mhm.
very hard to undo brainwashing. So
Yes.
all of these parents out there, and I'm talking to you parents, you've been taught that you are incapable. That's what your
Mhm.
schooling taught you. If you want your children to grow up to feel incapable like you do,
Mm.
send them to school, okay? It's
Mm.
really simple. The metric is very simple.
Mm.
I'm trying to get you to understand, just as incapable as you feel you are,
Mm.
that's a lie. You're
Yes.
not incapable because God gave
Yes.
he gave you your children. He could have given the school the children, but they would have committed abortion.
Mm.
You chose to have your children. Now make the strong choice to keep your children and to keep
Yeah.
them away from the predators, which are lurking in every single school out there. How do I know
Yes.
that? Okay. The test for if there are sharks in the water is very simple. Is the
Mm.
water salty? That's the test. There are
Mm.
sharks in the water. Unless it's a glass of water, I suppose maybe if you put salt in your water. Um,
Mm.
so my point is, if you want to find children because you're a child predator, where are you going to go?
Mm.
The schools. It's simple. Why wouldn't you go to the schools? Of course you're going to go to the schools. So all
Right.
of our schools have child predators. And I want to mention one other thing because I mentioned it on a show yesterday, and the mother of the host said to me, "Well, my mother taught in the public schools for 30 years."
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I know many teachers who are homeschooling their children. They're still working in the public schools, but their children don't attend public school. They
That's
homeschool their
true.
children." Okay. And
Yeah.
the mother texted him during the show, and
Yeah.
he saw it afterwards, but she texted him, "Principals are home educating their children."
Wow.
And so let me, because I know we're going to run out of time. I talk too much,
Mm.
but let me break it down for parents because of my new book, which is Parents Guide to Homeschool.
Yes.
So in the Parents Guide to Homeschool, it's styled as a workbook to get you to
Mm.
think, because you have to think of this. I can't
Mhm.
tell you everything and have you believe it. But
Yeah.
if you start thinking about it and working it through, then you'll believe it and you'll understand.
Mm.
Education is not purely academics. It's not
Right.
even 50% academics. It's maybe 30% academics.
Mm.
So if you feel incapable of teaching your fourth grader math, I'm sorry for that the school made you feel so incapable, but
Yeah.
that's the school's fault. That's not
Right.
your fault. Two things. All the math answers are in the book. So you don't need a teacher. You just need to buy the book, which is easy, Amazon. Uh, but number two, that's still only a small percentage of the equation, because when we're talking about education, the ultimate goal is for you at the end of your child's education
Mm.
to have an adult you'd love to have a relationship with.
Come on.
That means somebody who's giving and forgiving, knows how to ask for forgiveness, knows how to offer it, right?
So
These are the
true.
greater things.
Yeah.
Someone who's relational, knows how to get along in the world,
Yeah.
not necessarily pass 100 on the calculus exam, but somebody who can get a job, who knows how to do a job interview, who can have a
Yes.
conversation and ask questions and answer them.
Mhm.
Those are all part of education. So when people say to me, "Well, what about socialization?"
Mm.
I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
like the stupidest question. It's honestly the socialization question is a programmed from the Aparchik or whatever. It's
Mhm.
been programmed into the vernacular of the culture. What about socialization? What makes you think that sending a child into a classroom where they're not allowed to speak to other children is the way to properly socialize your child? Like,
And when they're only
it's
surrounded with people their age, it never ceases to
right.
amaze me.
It makes no
Yeah,
sense.
right.
So
I love what you
I pull
said.
all of that apart. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry.
I love what you said about how capable parents are, because I know as an elementary education graduate that when I graduated with honors, okay, magna cum laude from Florida State University, that I did not know how to teach a child how to read, actually, that I had never done it. And
No,
I
you got a
learned,
degree in classroom management.
yes, and
You
I
knew
learned,
behavior management
right,
for young people.
right. I learned how to teach a child how to read for the first time when I was homeschooling my daughter, who is now 26
Oh,
years old, and um, teaching other people how to launch their books. She's a book publishing coach. Okay. And so, it gave her a love of reading that she attributes to the just copious amounts of hours of reading out loud and reading that she did in her home in homeschooling. And so that was when I first learned how to teach children to read. And then you make another great point, um, that what's more important is ultimately a lot of it is relational. And I would not give anything for the tight knit relationships that I have
mhm.
with my children. I'm the mother of 10 children. My son just got married this weekend, and tens and tens of thousands of people have viewed me dancing with my son this weekend and in a loving embrace with one another. And I don't know that would have been my experience, had I not invested decades of my life into being with them all day. There's a crisis where children are being really indoctrinated against their parents
Yeah.
and turned away from their families. And I think that a lot of that is happening not only from social media and Hollywood, but also from what we see in the public schools. Would you agree with
Oh,
that?
oh, absolutely. Well, when you separate a child from his or her parents,
Mm,
that's the beginning of breaking that relationship.
mm,
So you can argue that it's unintentional. I don't care. Still doing it.
mm.
But one thing that you just said is really it's so profound, and I have to park on it for just a minute. The way you learn how to teach somebody is you teach them. That's
Through
the only way to
doing
learn
it.
how to teach someone,
Yes.
is by starting to teach them.
Mm,
And then you figure out how to teach them. The goal in home education is not for the parent to be the teacher. In fact, I call the parents
mm.
navigators. You're
Come
not the
on.
teacher,
That's good,
because
Sam.
God is ultimately the teacher of children. Children teach themselves
Mm.
with the parent navigating and showing them how to learn.
It's really
So
so
the
true.
best thing for the parent is to not have the answer, but to
Mm.
invest the time with the child to show the child how to find the answer. That's
Yes.
really the best case scenario. The maybe worst case scenario is for the parent to just feed the child the answer every single time. And
So good.
you remember, and probably, and I remember, how do
Yes.
you spell blah blah blah? Look it up, right?
Yes.
Well, now we have our phones, so we just, hey
Mhm.
Siri, how do you spell
Right.
blah blah blah, right? So
Mhm.
that's but still, we know, you just say, hey Siri, how do you spell this word? Like, we know there's a way to go find information.
It's
The
never
parent's
been
job,
easier. Oh my gosh, it's never
right?
been
But the
easier.
parent's job is just to facilitate that, so the
Right.
child knows how to go find information. And when you end your homeschool journey with your children with young people
Mm.
who know how to teach themselves, they
Yeah.
will never be out of a job. They will be fully equipped, because they know that if they're not entirely equipped, they can go equip themselves.
They can
And
figure it
that
out.
is true freedom.
Yes. So good. So good. Just this morning, I was reading an article that stated more than 50,000 students withdraw from Texas schools every year to begin homeschooling. More than 50,000. Traditional K-12 schools are hemorrhaging enrollment
Mm,
due to growing concerns over content, quality, and the politicization of the classroom. The
yeah.
steep decline is evidence that parents are ready for something different, something better. What do you believe the primary reasons are that parents are pulling their kids out of the public schools?
Well, I think you just said it. I mean, they're dissatisfied, and they
Mhm.
see that there's a better option. And
Yeah.
that option is less and less scary the more success they witness that
Right.
other people do it. I mean, look, Ben Carson went to school, but he was homeschooled by a mother who was illiterate.
Mm.
She made him
Wow.
write book reports every week that she couldn't read. You can teach a child.
Mm.
You just think you can't because that's their job security. They trained you to believe that you need them.
Wow.
And that's unfortunate, and we ought to put an end to that. I think
Yeah.
that Texas is a great example because they have the Texas Homeschool Coalition that I've
Yes.
partnered with on different things.
Right.
And so there's a really profound support system in Texas,
Right.
and there's a lot of encouragement in Texas. But still, like, I'm heartened to see that. If you do just a little bit of research, you'll discover that Harvard and Princeton and Yale are actively recruiting homeschooled students because they recognize that schooled students, they regurgitate what they're taught. They don't ask questions. They never question what they're taught. They just regurgitate. Whereas homeschooled students are basically they're encouraged to question what they're taught. They're encouraged to go and do their own research. And I'm
Right.
speaking obviously with generalities,
Yeah.
but they're actively being recruited because they're outside the box thinkers. Their creativity hasn't been entirely stifled by
Right.
an institution. And that's a good thing. And so if you're a parent interested in just the future of your children, the best choice you could make is home education. And then the way you get it done does have some ramifications, right? So a lot of parents are opting for K through 12 online schooling. I really, really don't advise doing that because that's just public school at home.
Agreed.
And that is literally like a trap to get you to fail. So you send your kid back to school.
Yes.
So I definitely wouldn't do that. And that's what I talk about predominantly in this book is
Okay.
changing the way we educate, because
Yeah.
we think that school is education. It's not. It's schooling. It's not education.
Mm.
So if we actually start to educate, what happens is you set your child free to pursue his interests.
Yeah.
You guide him like a navigator on that path, and he will shoot for the stars. He will burn brighter than you could ever imagine. And so it's a much bigger proposition than just, oh, do your times tables every day and
Right.
mommy has to stand over you with her finger out. Please don't do that. That's like the worst.
Yes.
It's not worth it. It's not
Yes.
worth it. I'll tell you, I butted heads with my daughter a little bit over math because she's not as math fluent as I am.
Very common for
And
females to